All right, welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. My name is Amali and I'm the events coordinator here at Books Are Magic. Before we get started, I just have a few logistics to point out for how tonight's going to go. First off, we do ask that you keep your mask on at all times at this event. We will be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end, so please start thinking of questions to ask and hold on to them. After the talk tonight, Natalka will be signing and personalizing books at the desk all the way behind me near the side door. And of course, we also have additional books available for purchase tonight. If you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we'd love to encourage you to buy a copy of The Night Shift online using the link in the live stream description. So with all that in mind, we're very excited to introduce Natalka Burian and Emma Straub, who are here celebrating the release of Natalka's newest novel, The Night Shift. Have you ever had to fight the urge to open an emergency exit in a movie theater or sneak a peek into a dimly lit employees only room in the back of your local bodega? In The Night Shift, protagonist Jean Smith discovers the secrets, the dangers, and the mind-bending physics that lie behind these doors, leading her into a wild goose chase through time and space in search of a missing friend. Natalka Burian is the co-founder of the Freya Project, a nonprofit reading series that supports community-based activism and the work of women and non-binary writers. She's the author of Welcome to the Slipstream, a YA book, and the cocktail cookbook, A Woman's Drink. And she's the co-owner of two bars, Elsa and Ramona. As I mentioned before, Emma Straub joins Natalka in conversation tonight. Emma is the New York Times bestselling author of 5 novels, This Time Tomorrow, All Adults Here, The Vacationers, Modern Lovers, Laura Lamont's Life in Pictures, and the short story collection Other People We Married, all of which, of course, are also available for purchase tonight. So without any further delay, please join me in giving Natalka and Emma a very, very warm welcome.
Yay! We did it! We're here! Oh my gosh, it's so nice to see all of your faces. I'm so happy. I'm so happy to see you guys. You have no idea. I'm so happy. It's so great. Yay! So the one thing that Amali did not say, that was beautiful as always, Amali. The one thing that Amali did not say that I assume most of you know, but will become very clear shortly if you don't, is that I also happen to own this bookstore. And that is one of the things that I can't wait to talk to you about is the overlapping your overlapping professions and how they became this sort of conjoined twin in this book, written in the weirdest, I'm just gonna say the weirdest years of my life. I won't speak for you. Yeah. Some weird years.
Weirdest years.
So I'm so excited and I'm so proud of you, my friend. Yay, hooray. Okay, so I want to start at the start, which is I read in an interview you gave that the idea for this book, that this sort of germ came from a conversation that you had with your husband about a song. Let's start there.
I love it. Yes. My husband over here, Jay Schneider. Thanks, honey, for giving me this idea. We were talking about this song, Destroyers Kaput. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but it's this song about kind of it's very blurry and sort of has this kind of ease to it, and it reminded me so much of this very twinkly time in life when everything is a little blurry, and it reminded me of this time when it really did seem like it would be possible to find a back door, and the lyric was going through the back rooms of the world all night. And I was like, what if we were talking, I was like, what if the back rooms of the world all night really went somewhere? Yeah. Instead of a closet where you maybe you shouldn't have did things you shouldn't have been doing, but it's just, that was sort of the idea, and I was like, whoa, yeah, what would that be like?
And so, and this was during the first
yeah.
part of the pandemic?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, big time.
And so at that point, what was happening in your twin professional lives at that point?
Well, I mean, as you know, it was a shock. I think everyone can relate to this, I'm sure. Like everyone's daily routine transformed, everyone's life slowed down unless you were like a doctor or something.
Yeah.
And I think that like kind of freezing in place, there were so many different kinds of panic. I mean, professional, like what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
When it slowly became like, are we gonna be closed for I think initially, a week,
Yeah.
2 weeks, like
Yeah.
a month? And I remember having this conversation with my husband and my brother-in-law. We have all worked together. Like, what happens if we have to close for like a month? And that was like, I don't know, what are we gonna do? So it was really like fermenting in this sphere of panic.
Yeah.
And like, but panic where you're just like frozen.
Yeah.
So it was a very dark place.
So it was early. So it was quite early then.
Yeah, it was definitely on the earlier side.
Yeah.
It was right after, I think it was it was between sanitizing groceries and like our cocktail takeout program. You know, it was like in that window, in that narrow window.
I mean, you have to laugh, right? You have to laugh. Pandemic modes of timing are, yes. Okay, so then your bars are closed temporarily, and you come up with a story. It's, I mean, Natalka and I, in addition to, both being novelists and small business owners, both wrote like pretty trippy books. Did you know, like, but that trippiness, like, and I want to, I don't want to give too much away, so I'm going to try to keep our conversation as spoiler free as possible, but but that blurriness and slipperiness was baked into the idea from the beginning.
Totally, 100%. I think so. And I'm gonna be disappointed if like 30% of this conversation is not like a New York City time portal conversation. It doesn't really have to jump in there.
Yeah.
But it was always, I think that was because it was a dark time.
Yeah.
I think it was also, and I'm not somebody, I don't really do a lot of like autofiction. That's not really like that's not where I go when I'm working on something creative, but this was probably the first time, and I think because the darkness was so present, you're just like, I gotta go somewhere.
Yeah.
It ended up being so much more personal than anything I've ever written, I think, because of that.
Yes. Same.
Yeah.
Same. It's so weird. Do you find it very weird to tell people, like, yeah, so this is like a time travel book that's my most personal, and people are like, what?
No, it's totally absurd, but it's so true. It's so true. I'm so happy that it's very validating to hear you say that. But I think also, and this might, again, another place of symmetry with us is we both have 2 children.
Yeah.
And I think part of it too is sort of like you're protecting them in this time, but you also have to deal with like what you're dealing with. So you're going really internal. Yeah. And I think like sometimes you need a time portal to get there, you know?
Yeah. So let's jump in the portal. So how did you know or decide where these doors were going to go and how they were going to work? Because like for me, like that was definitely I don't know, it was some interview or something, you said something that I felt so deeply, which was like, thank God for editors and copy editors. Like, let me tell you, that's a tough job. Like, try copy editing a book that has time travel in it. That is not for the faint of heart.
Like, it's like you really realize how smart you aren't. When you're reading someone else's notes, you're like, whoa. Oh, I know, I did not see that. Oh, you're right, it was Wednesday. Oh my God. It's like, whoa. Yeah.
Yes. So how did you decide? I mean, it's not all one sort of place or time, but like how did you figure out how they were going to work, how the shortcuts were going to work?
Well, I really wanted it to be at night. I think that to me was really, again, part of that blurriness, and also part of I think the I don't want to say magic because that seems too positive, but the vibe of the early 2000s after 9/11, I feel like that whole time was so wild and intense, and in my mind very like blurry and twinkly and but dark also. I think just because the city had this brush with death, like a collective brush with death, I think it was this time when we're just like reality TV was just starting to take off, so we're really seeing these distortions and and like, you know, the Bush administration like distorting the reality of our circumstances, and it was the first time I think, you know, it's like, oh my God, anything could happen, you know, and I really wanted to capture it, and specifically the darkness. And for me, so much of that era was spent like conscious only at night. So it was just like a natural place to set it, and to put it in the day just felt so, like, it just seemed like such a natural like box for the rules, you know.
Yes, totally. I found, thinking about your book and as I was preparing my questions, I find, like, thinking about myself in the early 2000s the most embarrassing. Like, and I mean, I'm someone who lived through the 80s and the 90s, like, which I would say like are objectively more embarrassing decades, but for some reason, but I think it's, I mean, for me, what I was thinking about was that, like, you know, for our generation, it was early adulthood, and like the first time that you're making mistakes, on your own that are like, you know, like not like, you know, some high school guidance counselor saying like, this is gonna go on your permanent record, but like something that sort of is on your permanent record. And so I loved it, and was like, you know, was like, oh God, those years. But yeah, I think you're totally right about the darkness. Okay, so but it's not, for all of you who have not read this book yet, it's not all darkness.
No.
And like, one of the things that I love about it the most is the way you like perfectly capture the camaraderie of like of a retail work environment, which I know very well. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, and how, like, you know, obviously now your relationship to, you know, your spaces is different, but like, if there were sort of jobs that you had, or just sort of what went into those, which it's a big important part of the book.
Totally. I had all these jobs. I had a million hospitality jobs, but I also was the assistant to a very famous psychotherapist who was like 90 years old and invented group therapy, actually.
Wow.
And he lived on the Upper East Side, and Dr. Goldstein is in many ways modeled after him. But it was very, I think both of those work experiences for Jean in the book really reflect the intimacy in each of those. Like, I was so close with Dr. Ormont. I like knew what kind of sandwich he wanted. I knew what time to wake him up from his nap. Like, I knew him better than I knew myself, you know? And also, again, like when you're working with, you know, people in an environment where you are all reliant on each other to make the money you're bringing home that night, the intimacy is so intense and really unlike anything I've ever experienced relationship-wise anywhere else in the world. It's very specific, it's very loving, but it's also very like cutthroat, and like you have to be accountable in a way that you don't in an office, I think. But it was like these different kinds of so thank you for bringing that up, because I'm really happy that came through. I think that both of those intimate kinds of like relationships have a very specific tone that I've never seen anywhere else.
I mean, and I'm glad you brought up the Jean's job with the therapist also, because like, to me, I was like so happy with that whole thread of the novel, because like, to me, I reading it, I was like, yes, this is like, it's like loneliness, therapy, like it's where my mind was, certainly, and I was so happy to sort of have Jean in that sort of pocket. just like at such a moment of like mental health crisis for everyone. But in like a complicated way, like it could have easily been like Jean and her therapist or something, but which would not have been as interesting. Do you have a therapist, and if so, did they read this book?
You know what, I do, and I don't think she has.
Oh my God, you have to! I gave my
don't-
therapist my book. I was like, look what we did together.
I kind of like don't want to put it on her. I'm like, you've done enough, like thank you, you've done enough. Thank you. Like I truly feel like and she's good at boundaries.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't want to interfere. But no, I think you're right. I think like for me, thinking about like human emotion and the intensity of human emotion, that is like the only thing I think that could puncture space and time. You know what I mean? Like that is the only thing powerful enough that we have, that we can generate as people. So like to me that jump was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so this book, as you said, takes place in New York City. What do you think it is? I mean, this is like a question that I could ask myself also, but like, what do you think it is about New York City that lends itself so well to this sort of narrative?
I'm so glad you asked that question. And this is a place where we diverge, because you are a born and raised New Yorker. You came onto the earth here and you've stayed here. I am not a born and raised New Yorker. I grew up on a farm. So when I moved to New York, I was 18 years old, and I've never left.
What year was it?
It was 1999.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I went from living in the middle of nowhere, where if you wanted to go to the grocery store, you had to get in the car and drive 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Like no neighbors, like nothing, like one brother who didn't like me, like nobody was there, and like feeling that was wrong, and I visited New York one time, and I was like, oh, this is the one.
Yeah.
This is, and I came here.
Yeah.
And it was like everywhere there's a story, everywhere there's a story. And I think the beautiful thing about setting a time travel story in New York is that camouflage is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like it does feel plausible, because you know, and I also like when I was writing about these shortcuts, I was thinking about it like coolness, and like you're a young person, you're like, oh, these people know like what's cool, but like this elusive sort of unquantifiable thing, and that to me was sort of like a metaphor for these shortcuts. Like what, like, do you know about these?
Yeah.
It was just like, it just seemed like another sort of, it's an environment where that kind of that setup exists already.
Yeah.
I mean, Sloane Crossley's new book, I don't know if you've read her new book.
I haven't read it yet, but I love her.
Cult classic, came out in June. And it's not time travel, but it is, it does use Lower Manhattan as sort of like this like psychic magnetic zone, and I think it works for the exact same reason, that if you're someone who has spent any time in New York City, you're like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Like
Anything, like anything is possible. Like, I mean, Pizza Rat, like anything is possible. Like truly,
So did you? And let's talk about music again, the idea started with music, and there's a lot of music in the book, and I also associate that time period with music in New York, and I don't know if it's just that, like, we were youths, and so we were. I mean, I say this, maybe you're like out at like cool shows.
I went to a couple of cool shows.
No, but maybe you're still doing that now, like 7 nights a week. I'm not. But in my 20s I was, and so I do associate that time period with music, but I don't know if everyone feels that way about their 20s. But what was it? How does the music sort of enter into this like coolness, cool blurriness?
Totally. So the music entered into it in the pandemic. Like that was why. Because when, you know, I was trapped in an apartment with my wonderful husband and my beautiful children, and in a time that was like no one could go anywhere, no one could do anything. The only thing that we could change was music.
Yeah.
And we listened to so much music that year, and we still do, but not like that first year. And we just listened to we listened to music that maybe we shouldn't have. I mean, my child at the time was like, what, 6 years old? Like, she probably shouldn't have been listening to them. But we listened to, we listened to their music, they listened to our music, and it was any time like the mood was getting uncomfortable, we would just change the music, and that would change the mood. So it was just like constant music all the time, and that just bled into the story. I think that, and yes, like I feel like I was out and going. I mean, yes, music was around. It was a big part of my, like, working in bars. It's always, restaurants. It's always on.
Yeah.
But I don't think it would have been as prominent had, again, the pandemic not sort of literally had it in my brain while I was writing.
Yeah.
And there are characters, like, in addition to sort of being, like, in the, like, as sort of, like, backdrop, there are some musical characters also. Can you talk about those and sort of where their inspiration came from? Because
Yes.
I love them.
Yes. Oh my gosh, my favorite character in this book is Alan Grudge, who's like this. He was inspired by Joey Ramone. He's like this very, like, for me it was this thought experiment of what if Joey Ramone was still alive, and like had not like been in this like weird tour loop, or like had like, separated from Johnny Ramone. Like, what would his life have been like? And so for me it was this Joey Ramone thought experiment of like him working at this pet store in the East Village, and like just, Gene running into him, and I just thought about the kind of person he would be, and I'm like, Joey Ramone is my favorite New Yorker of all time, and I've read so many books about Joey Ramone and watched so many like documentaries about the Ramones, and I just love him so much, and I feel like thinking of someone who's so talented and had so much opportunity, but like kind of stayed in the same place, and that was such a moving idea to me. And Alan Grudge actually was before anything else. Like, he was part of another book I was working on, but I had to take him out because he didn't. Thank you, Iris, by the way. I had to remove him, thanks to Iris's advice, because he wasn't working in that book. But I just couldn't stop thinking about him, and I just love him as like this kind of parallel line to Gene, because they seem so, like they just like peanut butter and jelly. They're so good together.
Yeah.
So he was so great in this book. I love him so, like, he is my favorite character in this book. Yeah.
I think it's nice to have favorites.
Yeah.
Especially when they're not the protagonist. To have
Yes.
someone who's really keeping you company. So when you started, I want to sort of go back to my question from the beginning, that like when you started writing the book, the bars were closed and you were home. You'd taken off, like, the Clorox wipes were not maybe on the counter anymore, but pretty close.
The smell of bleach was in the air.
So as you worked on the book and things started to open back up again, did it change anything about the book?
I think it went in a more optimistic direction.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, not up. It's still. I think would have been what it was, but I feel like there was more. And my wonderful editor, Laura Brown, I think she really helped me find a resolution for Gene that was more, I think, satisfying and positive and more like an upward trajectory. Whereas I think had we still been in with the sanitizing our groceries, I would not have ended up there. But it was really a, like, yeah, I think it helped sort of like trend towards a brighter ending.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I think it's really interesting, I think, to like see the books, sort of like we now are. I mean, I guess there was like Gary Steingart, who was very fast, who was like,
That
here's
book
my
is
pandemic
wild.
book. Like,
that book, I just read it. I just read it like 2 months ago, and I was like, whoa, I was not ready for this. I was not ready at all, because
Right.
no one's doing it,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
nobody's doing it.
And it was immediate. I can't remember what month that came out, but like that was the first book that we had here that was written inside the pandemic. But I think that like now we're getting to the point where everyone who's publishing books wrote them at least partially during the pandemic, even though, you know, some obviously people were working on before. But I think it's so interesting to see how people's brains, you know, went like a little bit haywire.
100%. No, there's like that processing. We're all processing. It's like
Yeah.
this, and like you're processing in a public place.
Yeah.
Essentially, when you're doing this, I'm so happy you brought that up because after I read that, it really put into stark contrast for me how few books I've read that have like been like, here's the pandemic and let's read about it. Like I mean, the only one I could think of beyond that was Tiffany Unique's Monster in the Middle.
Yeah.
And that kind of comes in at the end, and when she did it, like it worked, but it felt like a shock. I was like, oh my god, what's this doing here? You're like, like it's really astonishing. And it's when I read that, and I'm so like truly cannot believe how many people write books about the pandemic without writing about the pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, and like Louise Erdrich, like the sentence it comes in there at the end too. But I think that it's wild to see people process things in real time. But I'm wondering how, like, you know, having now written and published a book that is speculative and you know, different from your other work, how do you feel? This is not the like what are you working on now question, but more like how are you working now? Like, do you feel like writing this book has changed your relationship to your own writing process and like sort of what you feel open to?
I feel like I should be asking you this question. I feel like this is a really good question.
Later, you ask me later.
I don't know. I think if I learned anything, it is that like making it, and I've always been very squeamish about like personal things. Like, oh God, nobody wants this. Like, I have this like cringing feeling. But writing this book, I think, has made me understand that like a little cringe that I'm feeling might not read the same way. So I think that is one lesson I have gleaned from this process. But I mean, I don't know. I think if I've learned anything, it's like I know nothing. You know, there's like I thought I might have known something before, but I don't know anything.
But the cringe feeling comes from including things that feel personal to you.
Yeah.
I have lots of problems.
I mean, we're novelists. If we didn't have problems, like that would be a problem. Okay, so I'm gonna ask one more question and then open up to the audience. So in this, I guess maybe this, if this is too cringe because it's personal, then we can you can say skip and we can move on.
I need like that taboo buzzer.
Yeah. But because you know, Jean works in hospitality and you obviously do as well, do you feel like were there parts of, okay, this is I think asking it in a non-cringe way. Were there parts of your non-writer life that you were excited to include, that you were like excited to sort of play with in your writer brain?
You know what? Yes. And I think it's because it was really easy. It was like right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I don't have to do any research. I don't have to like go to the library and find any books about like what kind of pianos people like. No, like I just wrote the thing and it was all like your own Wikipedia page, and that was nice. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Same. Okay, if anyone else has questions for the extremely lovely Natalka, please raise your hand. Yes.
What was your research process for the book? Did you find yourself writing places that you had wanted to go in other areas of New York, or did you find yourself unexpectedly needing to know about things you hadn't expected about areas that perhaps you wouldn't have otherwise chosen?
It's a great question. Spencer Ackerman, author of Reign of Terror over here. Probably hit him up for a signature as well if you want to buy his book. Yes, I have always desperately wanted to like transport myself to New York in the 70s. I think like most people want that. I did read a bunch of, I've read a lot, like I said, I did a lot of Ramones deep dives, and there's a lot of, and then anytime I would get like something would like snag on my interest, I would like read about that or look into that. But another book that I relied on really heavily for the 2000s part of this was was Lizzie Goodman's Meet Me in the Bathroom, because full disclosure, I don't remember everything about that time. It was a busy time. So it was nice to be like, did that happen? Or like, was that there? And it was really great. And it was like reading that book. It's just so much fun. That book is so fun. I'm sure you could buy it here as well. Like, it's so much fun. It's such a, it's like very conversational. It's kind of like in that Legs McNeil style of like interview. It's just, and Lizzie's an amazing interviewer. So I loved, like, reading that book was like going into a bar. It was so nice.
Yeah. Who's next? Yeah.
This is stolen from Roxanne Gay. It's her question, but I really want to know, what is your favorite thing about your writing?
Oh, Roxanne Gay knows how to do stuff, man.
That's good. I'm going to use that
Yeah.
too. That's a good audience question.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I don't know. My favorite thing about my writing, I guess, I think in this book, especially in this book, but in all of my work, I really like making the place feel like alive and like a character. For me, I think that's my favorite thing.
Yeah,
That's a good one. What about you? What's your favorite thing about your writing?
I don't know. Jokes. My jokes. I like writing jokes.
Pretty good. Yeah, you're a pretty good joke writer.
Amali.
This is kind of inspired, I guess, by your answer to that question. I feel like one of the most striking things in this novel is the description of the characters going through the shortcuts. And it's just such a very specific, very tangible description that you create. And so I'm curious if you could talk about how you got to, where it is. I don't want to reveal too much for anyone who hasn't read it.
Yeah.
And if at first you had any other ideas for how it would feel to go through, and just how you landed at that very, distinct, somewhat unpleasant at times experience of going through the shortcuts.
No, that's a great question. Well, for me, it was very place-based. It started with where are they gonna be? Where are these gonna be? And then I think when and they're all kind of already in a small space. So I was thinking you're gonna, and I'm not an astrophysicist, unfortunately. this is where
I want my money back.
I really messed up by not being an astrophysicist writing this book. But I just kept thinking about like a wormhole, just thinking about going in a black hole, just being compressed. So it was science-based, Amali. It was all pure science.
That's a very good answer.
So we're talking about work a lot. If this is too personal, you don't have to answer, but I was curious, what's the worst job that you've ever had?
Oh my God, that's so good. It's such a good question. I've had a lot of really bad jobs. I was a receptionist at a temp agency, and it was probably the worst summer of my life because I was going out really late every night, and I had to be at the temp agency in Midtown at 8:45, and my boss was, and it was a temp agency, so it was the most depressing place to be a receptionist. It was awful. And you would think the people would be, you'd meet somebody interested. They were all so downtrodden and sad. And it was I was sitting with them, and while they were waiting, and it was just awful. And I remember the icing on the cake was that my boss was really this older man. It was an older man and a woman. It was a husband and a wife, and they were really concerned about my attire. So they kept trying to have these tactful conversations about the way I was dressing and the way I was doing my hair. And I just remember being do they want me to buy new, if they want me to buy new clothes, they gotta pay me more money. I'm not gonna, that was an awful job. That's such a good question. That was a terrible job.
If your bars had portals, where would they go?
Oh my god, well I know where they would, that's a great question. I know where they would be. They would be in the bathroom, 100%. And where would they go? I think they would have to go, I would like them to go, I think, to like a movie theater. I feel like that's always a great, like such a tempting entrance.
I love that question.
So I'm gonna ask this question because I have my 12th grade English students do a capstone original short story project. And they struggle with developing a character. Okay, so I was struck by your comment about I didn't read your book, about one of the characters that you just love so much. So I wanna know, what does it mean for a writer to love a character? I mean, that can't mean that you just, oh, well, this character is just such a good person. Right, because you have to create really deplorable, dislikable characters. So what does it mean to love a character?
God, that's such a good question.
Really?
You guys are really
These
bringing the
are
questions.
seriously, like firing on all cylinders.
And
Congratulations.
meanwhile,
Mr.
thank
Magic.
you for
That's awesome.
teaching 12th graders. That in and of itself, I feel like you need a round of applause. That's like a major. I think, and I don't have maybe this isn't a good answer, but for me, any character, I think this as a reader and as a writer, anytime you can like see yourself in a character, I think you're doing a good job. Like I think you're doing it right, even if especially if it's like a bad character,
Mm-hmm.
I think it means that you're, I don't know, right? Like I feel like you should sort of like be able to, there's like an empathizing I think you do. And the fondness, I think for me with that character 100% comes with just like you know, like spending time with this character and kind of building a connection with this character. But I think on some level, creating a convincing character, no matter where they fall on the moral spectrum, it has to be, and not in a cringy way, but you have to like put your, like, I don't know, it has to be personal like that.
Well, I do think, I mean, this doesn't totally answer your question, and this is not even my book, that's so sorry, I don't know, forgive me for wanting to chime in, but I do think that like, people often ask me, and I'm sure people ask you this, particularly with this book, like, so, like, which character are you, is Jean just like you? You know, people love to ask, especially young women novelists.
That's very generous, Emma.
Listen, we're both in this boat, okay, I'm calling us young. Especially young women novelists, we get asked that all the time. And my answer is always like, yes, all of them. You know, that like you have to put yourself in all of them. And it's never the parts that people suspect, you know? Like it's not always the one who maybe has your same hair color or whatever it is, or gender or race or whatever. But that, you know, you little shards of you are always in them, and sometimes that's a way to connect. Sorry.
No, great answer.
Maybe one more question? Oh my god, now everyone's feeling intimidated because the questions have been so good. Okay, I'm gonna ask one more and then you think about it. Okay, what have you been reading? Either in addition to Lizzie Goodman's book, what did you read while you were writing, or just have you been reading anything good lately?
Yes, oh my god, I just read the best book, Night of the Living Rez.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god, it's so good. It's so good. It should be against the law. It's like, it's just too, it's almost too good. Like reading it, I was like, I gotta put this down. It's just too good. But I also have been recommending Chantal Johnson's Post-Traumatic, like left and right. I think that is one of the most interesting books I've read all year. Yeah. It's just so good and weird and funny and dark, but like at the same time, and she's so smart. It's like, how do you do all this at once to make it like make sense? It's amazing. No, but I've been, and in a book that I actually wanted to get, I was like, I'm coming to Bookstore Magic. I want to get this book. Patricia Wants to Cuddle. Have you heard about that?
Yes, it's
I
got
am dying to read it.
This book has the greatest cover of
Yeah,
any book.
I feel like it's here somewhere.
Hold on,
Yeah,
I'm gonna show you.
Okay, let's do it. And I also want to read that Ghost George Sand book. You know what I'm talking about? That one? Yes.
Look at that book jacket, everybody. Look at that. Internet viewers.
Yeah, it was like Love Island meets like Bigfoot, like in a queer, like I was like, that's it. You just sold it to me. I read like 3 sentences about it. I'm in.
Yeah. All right, last chance. Okay, I'll let you all off the hook, but only if you cheer for Natalka very loud. So here's what's going to happen. And Amali, if I miss anything, just holler. So we are going to escort Natalka to the desk in the back where she will be delighted to sign your books, personalize them, etc. You should probably get like, I would say 2 to 4 copies.
Or more.
Or more, yeah. I mean, don't be shy. And there's an exit in the back as well. And just give her a minute to get settled. And thank you for coming. And
I also want to say we have Natalka's cocktail cookbook available, which I think would be such a delight
I
to
agree.
make a fun little drink while you read this wonderful novel. So that's available tonight as well.
Yeah.
A delicious pairing, the two of them.
so true.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
that's all. Thank you all so much for coming. Let's give it up once more for Natalka.